My best friend of 20 years told me to sit this one out in reference to her baby shower because I'd bring the vibes down after my miscarriage. When I tried to reassure her I could still be happy for her, she just made sounds and rushed out the door. I didn't say a word. That was 2 years ago. Last month, she rang my doorbell over and over at 10 p.m., leaving notes with shaking handwriting. When blood started dripping down my legs at work, I cried all the way to the hospital. It took 2 hours for the nurses to confirm it was a miscarriage. Haley, my cousin, was the first person I called after leaving the hospital. We've been inseparable since 2nd grade, when she split her fruit roll-up with me because I forgot my lunch money. And 20 years later, she was still the first person I called. When she got pregnant last June, she FaceTimed me from the bathroom, squealing the word finally over and over. So when she sent me the link to her Pinterest baby shower board, I wanted to be the one to plan it. And plan it for her I did. I hand-lettered 45 invitations because Haley insisted that she loved calligraphy. Coordinated dietary restrictions for 32 guests, including her mother-in-law's bizarrely specific no foods that start with P rule. I drove 2 hours to the specialty fabric store for the exact shade of sage green tablecloths she'd pinned on Pinterest. But I figured it was worth it, because me and Haley were talking more than we had in years, and I felt like I was getting my best friend back. But when I called Haley about my miscarriage 2 weeks before her baby shower, she went quiet. I expected her to tell me everything would be okay, or at least just listen to me. But no, she just muttered, "Oh dang, that really sucks," and I could hear her acrylic nails clicking on the screen like she was busy texting someone else. After a few more moments of silence, she spoke again. "Well, don't stress about it. I can always find a new planner for my baby shower," she said before hanging up. She didn't even ask if I was okay. I told myself that she was probably just too busy with her pregnancy to comfort me. And after a few days, there was a knock at the door. It was Haley, carrying a huge basket of expensive candles, flowers, and homemade cookies that were fresh from the oven. It was the most love I had felt since the miscarriage. I gave her a huge hug, but instead of hugging me back, she stood there with her arms glued to her sides. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice was cold. The room went silent. "This is hard to say, but I think you should sit this one out. The baby shower, as in, my mom thinks it's bad luck to have someone who miscarried at a baby shower. I don't agree, but I do think you'll bring the vibes down." I tried to reassure her, to tell her that not even a miscarriage could stop me from being happy for her. Her smile stayed frozen while she made little sounds, the kind you make when you're waiting for someone to stop talking. And in just minutes, she was rushing out the door, pretending like she had somewhere to be at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. The next morning, I woke up to a text that made my blood run cold. "Hey, my love, I just wanted to make sure we were clear about the baby shower sitch. You know the way you're super fragile and a crybaby sometimes? Well, I'd feel terrible if you broke down at my shower. My sister will collect the supplies tomorrow. I'll Venmo you for everything once I review the receipts. Thanks." 3 weeks of handmade paper flowers, $800 in decorations, 45 hand-lettered invitations, and she reduced it all to a pickup like I was a party supply store. When the day of the baby shower came, I spent most of the day having a depression nap. When I woke up at 8 p.m., I checked my phone and cried my eyes out. Everyone was posting themselves on their story beside the chocolate fountain, thanking Haley's sister Amy for planning the whole thing. Meanwhile, I was lying in bed, completely drenched in sweat, losing all will to live. That's when I knew I didn't just lose my baby. I lost my best friend too. In a moment of rage, I blocked Haley on everything and disabled all of my social media accounts. Permanently. Update. The whole thing made me realize that everyone in my life was really shitty LOL, so I started fresh. I'm now remarried to the love of my life, and even have a baby of my own. Everything was going well until 6 months ago. Amy, Haley's sister, called me telling me she was pregnant. I wasn't sure why she was calling me, until she asked me to be her godmother. I paused, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. "Why don't you ask Haley? After all, she's your sister." "Exactly," she interrupted. "She's my sister, which is why I know exactly what kind of person she is. What she did to you was disgusting. I want my daughter to have a godmother who shows up for people even when life is hard." The christening was beautiful. I'd helped Amy with everything, and unlike Haley, she appreciated it a lot. As I held baby Leah, I heard the click of heels on marble. Haley left through the side door. I didn't realize it yet, but Amy's decision had stung Haley, and she was going to make sure it backfired hard. In the church parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My hands were still trembling from holding baby Leah, and I fumbled to unlock the screen. The message made my stomach drop. Haley was demanding to know how Amy could betray family like this. I glanced around the parking lot and spotted her car idling near the exit, engine running. I walked over to her vehicle, my heels clicking against the asphalt. Through the window, I could see her gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. When I tapped on the glass, she rolled it down just enough to speak through the gap. She accused me of manipulating Amy for 2 years, planning this whole humiliation. Her voice cracked with rage as she insisted I'd orchestrated everything to hurt her. I kept my voice steady and explained that I hadn't even spoken to Amy until 6 months ago, when she called me out of the blue. Haley's hands shook visibly as she processed this information. The church door opened behind us, and Amy appeared, still in her Sunday dress. She approached Haley's car with determined steps. Amy told her sister she'd made her own choice based on years of watching how Haley treated people. The tension thickened when Haley's face twisted into something ugly. She threatened to tell their mother about Amy's college secret, specifically mentioning the termination of pregnancy Amy had hidden from the family all these years. Amy's husband Jake had followed her outside and overheard everything. His jaw clenched as he stepped forward, positioning himself protectively near his wife. He firmly told Haley she was no longer welcome at their family events. His voice carried the weight of finality that made even Haley pause. Before driving off, Haley leaned out the window and warned me that she knew where I worked now. She mentioned something about karma having a way of circling back. The security camera camera mounted on the church entrance captured the entire exchange, its red light blinking steadily. At the reception, I tried to focus on celebrating with Amy, but I noticed 3 of Haley's friends leaving early. They huddled near the coat check, phones in hand, whispering urgently. The atmosphere shifted palpably as more guests became aware something had happened. David found me near the gift table 20 minutes later, his face pale. He discovered Haley in the coat room, going through the presents. She claimed she was just looking for her card, but David had seen her rifling through multiple gift bags. When he confronted her, she already had her phone out. The confrontation revealed she'd been taking photos. David noticed multiple images on her screen as she hurriedly tried to close the camera app. She'd photographed my car in the parking lot, zooming in specifically on the daycare sticker displayed in the rear window. The sticker clearly showed Emma's daycare name and our pickup authorization number. Within an hour, Haley had started her campaign. She began texting mutual acquaintances from our 20-year friendship, painting me as someone who had stolen her sister. She told anyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable after my miscarriage, suggesting I'd latched onto Amy's family to fill the void. My mother-in-law pulled me aside during the cake cutting. She'd attended the christening and witnessed the parking lot scene. Her concern about the family drama potentially affecting her granddaughter was evident in her furrowed brow. She suggested we might need to be more careful about security measures. That evening, David checked our Ring doorbell footage while I put Emma to bed. His sharp intake of breath made me rush to see the screen. The timestamp showed 6 a.m. that morning, hours before the christening. Haley's car had driven slowly past our house, and through the high-definition camera, we could see her holding up her phone, filming our property. Amy called me later that night, her voice exhausted. Haley had been contacting extended family members all evening, painting me as a manipulative interloper who had destroyed their sisterhood. Amy's cousins, aunts, and even distant relatives were receiving calls about how I'd supposedly planned this betrayal for years. Monday morning arrived with new complications. The daycare director pulled me aside during drop-off, her expression concerned. She mentioned receiving a call from a woman claiming to be my sister, expressing concerns about the home environment. The caller had asked probing questions about Emma's behavior and whether the staff had noticed any signs of neglect. I spent my lunch break reviewing my social media settings, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. My old Facebook posts about the miscarriage and my previous divorce were still public. I'd never thought to make them private, and now Haley had access to years of vulnerable moments she could weaponize. The privacy settings had never seemed important until now. Tuesday brought a new level of harassment. Haley appeared at my workplace lunch spot, settling at the table directly next to mine with one of her friends. They spoke just loudly enough for me to hear every word, discussing people who prey on grieving families and insert themselves where they don't belong. My sandwich sat untouched as I listened to her performance. My boss called me into his office Wednesday morning. His uncomfortable expression told me everything before he spoke. He'd received an anonymous email about my emotional instability and history of family conflicts. The email suggested I might be a liability to the company's reputation. Though he assured me he didn't believe it, the seed of doubt had been planted. Thursday's meeting with HR felt like an ambush. The director, a woman I'd only met twice before, had a sorority photo on her desk that made my blood run cold. There was Haley, front and center, arms linked with the woman now questioning me about concerning allegations. The connection was too convenient to be coincidence. That night, I drove to Amy's house, taking back roads and checking my mirrors constantly. The paranoia felt justified after everything that had happened. Amy met me at the door with red-rimmed eyes, her phone clutched in her hand. She showed me the latest texts from Haley. The messages were pure blackmail. Haley demanded Amy fix this situation, or she would send photos from Amy's college party days to Jake's employer. She claimed to have kept the pictures all these years just in case. The threat was clear. Choose between your husband's career and your chosen sister. David's mother called Friday morning with troubling news. Other neighbors had been asking about our family situation after Haley approached them at the community pool. She'd been there with her son, using the opportunity to spread her version of events to anyone who would listen. The gossip network in our neighborhood was now fully activated. The pattern became crystal clear as I mapped out Haley's actions. She was systematically contacting every shared connection from our 20-year friendship, poisoning each relationship with carefully crafted lies. Every person who might support me was being turned against me, one conversation at a time. Saturday afternoon brought an unexpected ally. Sophie, Jake's sister, had never liked Haley. She called to offer her support and share stories about Haley's treatment of Amy over the years. Her insights revealed a pattern of manipulation I'd been blind to during our friendship. The most shocking revelation came when Sophie mentioned the CPS threat. During an argument years ago when Amy wouldn't lend Haley money, Haley had threatened to report Amy to Child Protective Services. Amy had confirmed it happened, but begged Sophie never to mention it. The threat had hung over Amy's head ever since. My neighbor knocked on our door Sunday evening with concerning news. She'd noticed Haley driving by our house slowly throughout the week, sometimes parking across the street for extended periods. The surveillance was escalating beyond digital harassment into physical stalking. Monday morning at daycare brought another warning. Emma's teacher pulled me aside quietly, glancing around to ensure privacy. Someone had been approaching other parents during pickup time, asking questions about our family. The inquiries seemed innocent on the surface, but felt orchestrated to gather information. Haley's next move came through social media. She created a private Facebook group called Protecting Our Children and invited every parent from Emma's daycare. The group's header featured a photo of Emma from a public playground visit, cropped to remove me from the frame. The violation of using my daughter's image made my hands shake as I scrolled through the invitation list. I recognized the manipulation pattern immediately. Years ago, Haley had done something similar to our cousin Martha over a borrowed wedding dress. Martha had accidentally spilled wine on it at the reception, and Haley had systematically turned their entire friend group against her. The isolation had been so complete that Martha moved to another state. Wednesday afternoon, Emma's best friend's mother confronted me in the parking lot. She'd seen Haley crying at Starbucks that morning, surrounded by sympathetic daycare moms. Haley had painted herself as the victim, claiming I'd destroyed her family out of jealousy. The performance had been convincing enough that this mother now questioned whether Emma should continue their playdates. Relief came from an unexpected source. Maria, another daycare parent, approached me Thursday morning. She'd declined to join Haley's Facebook group because something felt off about the whole situation. Maria's ex-husband had used similar tactics during their custody battle, and she recognized the signs of manipulative behavior immediately. David installed security cameras that weekend after discovering footprints in the flower bed beneath Emma's bedroom window. The soil had been disturbed multiple times, suggesting repeated visits. We also found cigarette butts near the fence, though neither of us smoked and our neighbors didn't either. The police took our report Monday morning but explained the limitations we faced. Without explicit threats or physical contact, pursuing charges would be difficult. The officer suggested documenting everything and considering a restraining order if the behavior escalated. His matter-of-fact tone made it clear how many similar cases he'd seen. Maria introduced me to 3 other parents who'd noticed Haley's aggressive recruiting tactics. They'd all received multiple messages pushing them to join the Facebook group and report any concerns about my parenting. One mother showed me screenshots of Haley's increasingly frantic messages when she'd refused to participate. The playground incident happened Tuesday afternoon. I discovered Haley had been photographing Emma during public playtime, capturing images from various angles. Another parent had noticed and found it strange enough to mention. The photos themselves weren't illegal, but the intent behind them felt sinister. Sophie revealed more disturbing history that evening. 5 years ago, Haley had targeted their friend Jessica when she started dating Haley's ex-boyfriend. The harassment had followed an identical pattern: social media campaigns, workplace interference, and systematic isolation. Jessica had eventually moved away to escape it. My response to Haley's provocations became a study in contrasts. While I maintained my routine and remained calm during daycare interactions, Haley's behavior grew increasingly erratic. 2 parents independently mentioned how composed I seemed compared to Haley's tearful performances and aggressive recruiting. Amy's due date approached rapidly, adding urgency to the situation. She needed Haley excluded from the birth but worried about family backlash. The stress was affecting her pregnancy, and her doctor had already expressed concerns about her blood pressure. Every family gathering became a minefield of potential confrontation. The daycare director called me in for a meeting after reviewing visitor logs. She discovered Haley had signed in 3 times claiming to be conducting a safety observation for the parent committee. No such committee existed, and Haley had manufactured false authority to gain access. The director implemented new security protocols immediately. David and I encountered Haley's husband at the grocery store that Saturday. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, and avoided making eye contact. When David tried to make small talk, he mumbled something about being busy and hurried away. The strain on their marriage was becoming visible to everyone. Haley made her first direct offer the following Monday. She cornered me after school drop-off, proposing to forget everything if I publicly apologized and stepped down as godmother. Her desperation showed in how quickly she spoke, words tumbling over each other. I refused calmly, which seemed to infuriate her more than anger would have. 3 more parents reported Haley's approaches over the next few days. One had actually recorded her tearful performance on their phone, capturing the contradictions in her story. The video showed Haley claiming I'd been planning this for years, despite previously saying I'd manipulated Amy in just 6 months. Sophie provided crucial evidence that Wednesday. She had saved text messages from months before showing Haley had already assumed she'd be Amy's baby's godmother. The presumption revealed her sense of entitlement and explained why my selection had triggered such an extreme response. I began to understand the limits of Haley's influence. People who knew her well saw through her manipulations, while newer acquaintances initially believed her stories. Long-term daycare families who'd observed my parenting for years remained supportive, creating a buffer against her campaign. Maria's husband, who worked in IT, helped me compile evidence of digital harassment. He discovered Haley had created multiple fake social media accounts to message my friends and employer. The IP addresses traced back to her home network, providing concrete proof of her orchestrated campaign. David took time off work to support me, despite his boss expressing irritation about the drama affecting his productivity. His choice to prioritize our family over career advancement showed me how much our relationship had grown since my first marriage. We faced this challenge as true partners. Amy and I grew even closer through the shared experience. She revealed more about growing up with Haley, painting a picture of constant manipulation and emotional blackmail. Our chosen sisterhood strengthened with each revelation, built on mutual support rather than biological obligation. Despite having embarrassing information about Haley from our 20-year friendship, I refused to retaliate in kind. My restraint frustrated some supporters who wanted me to fight fire with fire, but I understood that maintaining my integrity was more important than winning through mutual destruction. The school event confrontation exposed Haley's lies publicly. When describing the baby shower situation to a group of parents, she contradicted her own timeline, claiming I'd been absent from Amy's life for years, while also saying I'd manipulated her recently. Several parents noticed the inconsistency immediately. Multiple witnesses began corroborating Haley's concerning behavior around the daycare. Parents compared notes and realized they'd all seen her watching from her car, taking photos, and approaching different people with variations of the same story. The pattern became undeniable when viewed collectively. Haley's husband started doing all school pickups alone. Other parents noticed he looked increasingly worn down, sometimes sitting in his car for long periods before going inside. The family fracture was becoming public, adding another layer to Haley's desperation. The daycare parent network began sharing their experiences more openly. What started as isolated incidents formed a clear picture when connected. Haley's manipulation tactics became less effective as parents communicated with each other, comparing the different versions of her story. Jake's family offered their support after learning about the situation. They'd experienced Haley's behavior during Amy and Jake's wedding, when she'd tried to control every aspect and thrown tantrums over minor decisions. Their validation helped Amy feel less guilty about excluding her sister. Cornered at Amy's prenatal appointment, Haley finally admitted her real motivation. She felt the godmother role was rightfully hers, something she'd assumed without ever discussing it with Amy. The entitlement in her voice revealed how she viewed relationships as possessions rather than choices. Key daycare parents began apologizing for initially believing Haley's stories. They'd realized the truth through observing both of us over time. My consistent behavior contrasted sharply with Haley's escalating dramatics, making it clear who was being truthful. Haley's options narrowed as more people refused to engage with her campaign. Her Facebook group membership stalled, and several parents who'd initially joined quietly left. The momentum she'd tried to build was reversing, leaving her increasingly isolated. Sophie's old text messages revealed Haley had used identical tactics during the wedding dress incident with Martha. The same phrases appeared: concerns about mental stability, claims of manipulation, systematic contact with mutual friends. The playbook was so similar it seemed rehearsed. I prioritized keeping Emma's life normal despite the chaos. Her activities continued unchanged, and I ensured she remained unaware of the adult drama. My protective instincts focused on shielding her rather than paranoid restrictions, maintaining balance despite legitimate concerns. The daycare community's support grew stronger after witnessing my dignified response. Parents who'd remained neutral initially began offering help, from coordinating playdates to sharing security concerns. The solidarity felt genuine, built on observed behavior rather than taking sides. Haley's attempts to infiltrate my book club and gym both failed spectacularly. Members rejected her applications after recognizing her name from the daycare drama. Word had spread through overlapping social circles, creating natural barriers to her harassment. The pharmacy parking lot incident changed everything. Haley's husband witnessed her screaming at me while I calmly loaded groceries into my car. The contrast between her hysteria and my composure finally opened his eyes to what others had been seeing. He sat in his car afterward, head in his hands. Community awareness of Haley's behavior reached a tipping point. She found herself quietly excluded from social events, as hosts worried about potential drama. The isolation she'd tried to create for me was reflecting back on her instead. Maria helped compile documentation showing over 100 instances of contact and stalking in just 3 weeks. The sheer volume demonstrated obsessive behavior that went far beyond normal family conflict. The evidence would prove crucial for any legal action. Amy went into early labor, forcing immediate decisions about hospital security. The stress of Haley's campaign had affected her pregnancy, and her doctor insisted on strict limitations on visitors. The medical necessity provided cover for excluding Haley without direct confrontation. Haley's mask completely dropped when she demanded hospital access as real family. She called the nursing station repeatedly, insisting on her rights as Amy's sister. The staff, briefed on the situation, remained professionally firm in following Amy's wishes. I faced a difficult choice between supporting Amy during labor and protecting my own family from potential escalation. David and I created a schedule that allowed me to be present for Amy while ensuring Emma remained supervised and safe at all times. The safety plan we developed with trusted daycare parents showed how much I'd grown. Instead of facing harassment alone, I'd learned to accept help and build community support. The network we created provided both practical security and emotional strength. Amy's mother finally acknowledged the truth after witnessing Haley's hospital behavior. The extended family's Thanksgiving plans changed accordingly, with Haley being uninvited from the gathering. The matriarch's decision carried weight that individual conflicts couldn't achieve. Through persistent documentation and witness accounts, Haley's pattern became undeniable to everyone except herself. The evidence painted a clear picture of escalating harassment that no reasonable person could dismiss. Truth had become our strongest weapon. Haley's husband moved to his mother's house after discovering she'd involved their son in her schemes. She'd been coaching him to ask other children questions about Emma's family, crossing a line that even he couldn't ignore. The separation marked a serious consequence for her actions. One last manipulation attempt came through Amy's mother's death years ago. Haley tried to use their shared grief to turn Amy against me, claiming their mother would be horrified by Amy's choice. The emotional blackmail failed when Amy firmly rejected the attempt to weaponize their mother's memory. Amy's final rejection of Haley's manipulation was absolute. She chose the family that had chosen her, supporting her through pregnancy complications while Haley created chaos. The biological bond couldn't compete with genuine care and respect. Haley's husband insisted on family therapy after documenting her obsessive behavior. He'd kept records of her computer activity, late-night planning sessions, and increasingly erratic behavior. His ultimatum forced Haley to confront consequences she couldn't manipulate away. Our chosen family unit emerged stronger from surviving the crisis together. Amy, Jake, David, and I formed bonds that went beyond traditional relationships. We'd proven that family meant showing up during hard times, not just claiming connection through blood. Several community members who'd initially supported Haley began reaching out with apologies. They'd realized how they'd been manipulated and wanted to make amends. The community healing process started with acknowledging how division had been artificially created. I presented Haley's pattern to a family meeting using only facts and documentation. No emotional appeals or personal attacks, just time-stamped evidence and witness statements. The truth spoke more powerfully than any argument could have. The family collectively decided to establish boundaries with Haley for everyone's protection. This wasn't about punishment, but about preventing future harm. The decision came from group consensus rather than individual conflict, making it harder for Haley to challenge. Former victims of Haley's manipulation began sharing their stories at the family meeting. Martha joined via video call from her new state, describing how Haley had isolated her over the wedding dress incident. The pattern of behavior stretched back years, each story reinforcing what I'd experienced. Family members who dismissed individual incidents couldn't ignore the collective evidence. The school officially banned Haley from the grounds after reviewing security footage. The daycare director implemented stricter visitor protocols, requiring photo identification and pre-approval for all non-parent visitors. These institutional protections provided a layer of security I hadn't expected, but deeply appreciated. Maria's husband finished compiling the harassment timeline, creating a comprehensive document with screenshots, timestamps, and witness statements. The evidence filled 3 binders, each instance meticulously cataloged. This level of documentation would support any future protective measures we might need. The core family group acknowledged Haley's behavioral pattern during an emotional discussion at Amy's mother's house. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd previously remained neutral admitted they'd seen warning signs but hadn't wanted to take sides. Their commitment to supporting victims moving forward felt like a significant shift in family dynamics. That evening at 10 o'clock, our doorbell rang repeatedly. Through the security camera, I watched Haley standing on our porch, pressing the button over and over. She left handwritten notes wedged in the doorframe when we didn't answer. David called the police while I moved Emma to our bedroom, away from the windows. Emma woke terrified by the persistent doorbell ringing. I held her close, humming softly while David handled the situation outside. The police arrived within 15 minutes, their presence finally convincing Haley to leave. She drove away slowly, her taillights disappearing around the corner. Some neighbors questioned whether I'd provoked this response. One couple suggested that family disputes should be handled privately, implying I'd somehow escalated things unnecessarily. Their victim-blaming stung, but I recognized it as ignorance rather than malice. They hadn't lived through systematic harassment. David took Emma to his mother's house the next morning for safety. I stayed behind to deal with the aftermath, cleaning up the scattered notes Haley had left. Each one contained increasingly desperate pleas mixed with veiled threats. The handwriting grew more erratic with each page. The decision to pursue formal protection felt inevitable after the home visit. Despite preferring to handle things privately, I couldn't risk Emma's safety. I gathered the documentation Maria's husband had compiled and prepared to take official action. This choice would trigger Haley's final, most desperate campaign. Family members gathered at Amy's mother's house to discuss establishing boundaries. The meeting had been called to create a unified response to Haley's behavior. Halfway through the discussion, Haley arrived uninvited. Her mother had texted her the location, either from guilt or misguided hope for reconciliation. The ambush became a confrontation when Haley burst through the door. She denied every accusation initially, claiming we'd all misunderstood her intentions. Her performance might have worked before, but the room held too many witnesses to her behavior. The security footage and recordings made denial impossible. When confronted with video evidence of her harassment, Haley's composure cracked. She revealed the core of her resentment, admitting she'd always felt I was the daughter her mother wished she had. The confession explained years of subtle competitiveness I'd never fully understood. Her pain was real, but it didn't excuse her actions. Amy's mother finally broke her silence about Haley's behavior. She admitted seeing how Haley hurt people but had always made excuses, hoping she'd change. The matriarch's acknowledgement of the pattern carried weight with family members who'd been reluctant to take sides. Her words shifted the room's dynamic completely. I faced a choice between pressing charges or accepting family-negotiated boundaries. Criminal prosecution would create lasting legal consequences for Haley and affect both our families for years. The alternative was a mutual no-contact agreement that would establish clear boundaries without involving the courts. After careful consideration, I chose the no-contact agreement. The decision wasn't about forgiveness, but about finding peace through boundaries, rather than punishment. A prolonged legal battle would keep Haley centered in our lives, exactly opposite of what we needed. The agreement would create space for healing. The terms were straightforward but comprehensive. Haley would have no contact with my family through any means. No calls, texts, social media, or physical approach. She couldn't use third parties to relay messages or gather information. Any violation would result in immediate legal action with all documented evidence presented. Haley had to accept these terms or face prosecution for stalking and harassment. The choice was hers, but the consequences of refusal were clear. Her husband, still living separately, attended the meeting to witness the agreement. His presence added weight to the seriousness of the situation. Her final attempt to guilt Amy failed completely. Haley tried emotional manipulation one last time, claiming Amy was choosing a friend over blood. But Amy stood firm, surrounded by family members who'd finally seen the truth. The unified front left Haley with no leverage for her usual tactics. Extended family members agreed to enforce the no-contact boundaries. They would refuse to relay messages, share information, or enable any form of contact. This collective commitment was crucial. Haley's manipulations had always relied on finding weak links in family loyalty. Now those links were reinforced. I reclaimed my peace as Haley's influence permanently ended. The constant anxiety of checking over my shoulder, screening unknown calls, and worrying about Emma's safety began to fade. Freedom felt different than I'd expected. Quieter, calmer, like releasing a breath I'd been holding for months. Haley entered therapy voluntarily after her husband made it a condition of reconciliation. He'd documented enough of her obsessive behavior to insist on professional help. Whether she'd actually change remained uncertain, but at least she was facing consequences that might lead to self-reflection. The community began healing from the divisions Haley had created. Parents who'd been turned against each other started talking again, comparing notes about how they'd been manipulated. The daycare pickup line returned to normal conversations instead of whispered concerns and suspicious glances. New bonds formed among those who'd stood together against Haley's toxicity. Maria and I developed a genuine friendship built on mutual support. Other parents who'd refused to join Haley's campaign became part of our trusted circle. We were stronger for having survived the experience together. Amy chose to name her daughter Hope, honoring new beginnings after family trauma. The name carried special meaning: hope for healthier relationships, for chosen family, for boundaries that protect rather than divide. Every time I heard it, I remembered that sometimes love means letting go. 6 months later, I stood as godmother at Hope's baptism. The church was filled with people who'd supported us through the crisis. The no-contact agreement had created necessary space for healing. Haley channeled her energy into therapy and her own family, while our chosen family thrived without fear. Both women learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. Our children would grow up in separate but peaceful worlds, protected by the boundaries we'd established. I finally understood that family isn't about proximity or history, but about who celebrates your joy without needing to own it.